haven't been waiting for a response. I've actually been waiting for validation, you know? I've been waiting for somebody to say, you know, you've got great writing capability, what you've got to offer is brilliant, you matter, your story matters, your journey matters, these other women's stories who were within this book, their stories matter.
So what I started to do, I started to just like buy and sell domain names when the internet was like literally you had to plug it into your wall. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
It's so easy because you're chasing this dream and this vision that you have, and to feel as though you need to be working all hours of the day. And yes, there are some days where you need to push yourself that little bit harder, but you really need, if you haven't got your health and your well-being, you haven't got any business.
Hello and welcome to another episode of She's the Boss Female Entrepreneur Stories, where I'm joined by phenomenal women at all different stages of their entrepreneurial journey. As usual, if you haven't already done so, make sure you click that subscribe button so that you receive a notification every time I release a new video, because you want to know so you don't miss out. So make sure you click that subscribe button now. Today, I'm joined by Michelle Raymond, who is the founder of The People's Partner. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
So tell us more about The People's Partner. What is it? It's quite an interesting name. It doesn't really give much away, but it kind of does at the same time.
Yeah, it's one of those names where you think, okay, it's definitely something around partnership and people. And that's how I've always kept it. And I've kept that ethos throughout whatever I do. So it's a HR and coaching consultancy. And it's basically one business split into two parts. So there's one part which just deals with human resources, which could be anything from recruitment, training, development, coaching, redundancy, pensions. That's one side of the business. So that's where we partner with corporates. And the other side partners with small business owners and entrepreneurs. And we help them become more visible and help them get more clients through into the business. So that's the two halves of the one business.
Okay. And how long have you been trading, and what kind of set you on this path?
Yeah, so I've been doing this now, what are we in? For about 4 years. Mm-hmm. So I've been doing it for 4 years, and yeah, I love it. And the thing is, unlike most other people who wanted to be entrepreneurs, who wanted to start their own business, I didn't start off that way. That wasn't my journey. That wasn't my desire. I actually fell into entrepreneurship literally because I got asked. Well, I was at an event and they said, is there anybody here who started a business and wants to come up and pitch their business? So, I was happily being a human resource manager, business partner. And as far as I was concerned, I had autonomy. I can come in when I needed and when I didn't need to. So I didn't feel like I had to join the rat race of the entrepreneurships. So I sat down, minding my own business, and my husband, when he was my fiance at the time, put my arm up. And out of how many hundreds and hundreds of people in the room, they decided to call on me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, now how do I go on stage, mic in my hand, and talk about this fictitious company that does not exist? So, yeah, strange but true, strange but true. So literally, I thought, okay, I can talk about human resources. I understand it. I've been doing it for years, more than 13 years. So I started talking about why small businesses should still have some element of HR when they have their first hire, even when they're taking on contract staff or 0-hour workers. And I talked about that. I talked about how to build a team and get an active and proactive empowered team. So I talked about all of those good stuff. When I got off stage, while I was still on stage, people were asking me questions. And you know that fear, like, what if they ask me a question I can't answer? But it went okay. When I got off stage now, I had so many people come to me and said, Michelle, loved your talk. Listen, we want to work with you. Can you work with us? We need policies done for the business. We need a staff handbook. How much do you charge and when can you do it? And this time I'm thinking, so what I did, because you don't want to say no, so I took their numbers, the names and the numbers, and I said, what I'll do, I'll get back in touch with you by the end of the week. So I knew that I had to come up with something. So I went to bed that night and I was thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? Download something into my spirit, because I'm not a business owner, I'm not an entrepreneur. And that night, it's like something just said to me, you like to partner with people, you like to work with people, so why don't you call yourself the people's partner? And that just fell into my spirit. And the day later, I registered it on HMRC and, got all my stuff ready, became a limited company in less than a week. And I started, and that's how I did it. So by the time I met up with the first person, I didn't know what to charge, because I hadn't done any due diligence, any research, any market research, anything. So my first client, I charged him £50. And I did a lot of work for £50. But, I had no idea. This is when you go into something blindly. I would never encourage it. But yeah, and I've never looked back. And here I am 4 years later.
What an amazing story, though. I love that. Absolutely. And it's so interesting because I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I suppose I've been ignorant to the fact that not everybody has that same experience. And the more women I interview, the more I'm realizing most people actually didn't have a plan. They just fell into it as you did. But I love that it wasn't even you that put your hand up.
So I'm like, thanks, husband. It's like, I had no plans. When I mean no plans whatsoever, I was one of those people where, I was happy getting my regular money, because I knew that the money will come in, I can pay my mortgage, I can pay for my car. So it was regular. I had no desire to try and fight for clients. I had no desire to try and market myself. None of it. I had no desire to make a big impact on the world. If I'm going to be quite honest, I was happy as I was. But when opportunities present themselves, a changed mindset. Yeah, that's all it was. And I've never looked back.
And it's interesting how I assume you've spoken to your husband about this.
Yes.
After it's happened, did he recognize? Because I assume that must be why he put your hand up. Did he?
Yeah.
That he was sitting thinking, actually, I think that she should do this, and she's not.
Yeah, he's always been on at me, Michelle, you should start your own business. Because at this time, loads of people would be getting in touch with me and saying, oh, Michelle, I've got a disciplinary hearing. What should I be saying? What should I not say? And I had other people who'd run businesses and they were saying, Michelle, can you write as a contract? So I was doing little bits on the side, but I still didn't see it as a viable business for me to do. But my husband was like, Michelle, you've got to do this. And I'm like, come on, man. And I fell into it. So I'm here now. And
it's interesting, probably one or two of the interviews and in a few bits of like content that I've put out, I say one of the most important decisions an entrepreneur can make is who they marry. And actually, I think this is a prime example of that, because actually, had he not put your hand up, would you be an entrepreneur now?
Do you know what? I have to ask myself that so many times. And I say to my husband, do you know what? We made the right choice picking each other, because he is so resourceful. I don't know if you've seen, but sometimes I put out videos and the quite high level videos, and I've got all the captions, I've got all of those. He does all of that for me. He does all when I'm doing my video training, when I do my online courses, he does it all for me. And yeah, he's amazing.
I can't wait to come off this so I can go and show my husband that exact section, because I've been asking him to sort out my podcast for about 3 months now. I'm going to say, look, Michelle's husband's doing all the video editing. I'm just asking you to do the podcast for me.
Exactly. That's what, and I said to him, you have your uses.
So obviously, because you didn't plan to set up a business, did you continue in your work for a period, or did you just how did you juggle that?
So yeah, I continued, and what I did then, and what I've always now encouraged other people to do, is plan it. So although I started thinking, oh, actually this entrepreneurship life could possibly work, but I still wanted to plan, and I still wanted to keep connected to the right people, because I didn't know when I may need them later on down the line. So I gave myself a time frame, marked it on the calendar, and then I started seeding that to my chief exec, because I had quite a high position and it would take a long time to replace me. And I had been at that company for 11 years.
Wow.
Right. So I just didn't want to run off. So I wanted to put plans in stage, and also I wanted to make sure I had enough financial resources as well, you know, to be able to do the marketing and do whatever I needed to do within business. So I made sure that I worked very hard while I was still, had my little side hustle, but I worked very hard within the job, so there was no difference. And I always tell people, when you're looking to exit, don't put yourself in a position where you're going to be pushed. Keep performing, keep showing up, doing what you need to do. And I continued doing that. So I got bonuses throughout the year. And I left and I handed in my notice to leave in the end of December. So I wouldn't come back in the new year. That way I get the end of year bonus as well. Then I got the Christmas party and all of that. So I could, all those good stuff. And then once the transition was made, it just felt so right by that time. Because I'd made sure that every project that I was working on in the company, it had come to an end and I'd finished it, tied up all the loose ends. And I also was around to hire my replacement because I had a lot of knowledge transfer for that person. So by the time January came, it was a new start, new me, new business.
Oh, I love that story. Such a powerful journey. The idea of interviewing my replacement just seems a bit mind-boggling to me. Was there ever a point where you were thinking, oh, she's not as good as me, or actually she's better than me?
Listen, no. The former. I was like, and I was thinking, oh, you're not going to be very good here. Oh, she ain't going to like it here. And there's lots of that. But we found somebody, and I'm always of the mind, I didn't want them to come in and have lots of work undone for them to fix. And then then you hear, oh, well, Michelle left that unfinished. So I made sure I was around. So actually at one point we were working together, and I wanted that because I wanted to show her this is the day-to-day business as usual, and this is the ad hoc, and this is what you do in a remuneration discussion. This is what you do with the appraisals and performance management. And there was a lot of board interaction. And she wasn't at that level in terms of speaking to the board, but you know what, I try to give her as much support and guidance as I possibly can, so that as far as I'm concerned, I want to leave a legacy. So I will be talked about in the positive because I've left her fully equipped and not trying to find, oh, where did I put that last policy? Yeah, I don't like all of that. Don't like that.
Yeah. No, and I think it's probably the most mature way of doing it. Also, it's the most beneficial way of doing it especially because you're still working within kind of the same industry. Yes. You don't want to have a bad reputation. I think sometimes people just like, yeah, bye, I quit, I'm off, not thinking about the ramifications further down the line. And the world is small, and you just don't know who's going to know who and how that could negatively impact you in the future. And
the thing is, I totally agree with what you're saying as well, because my first real paying, like tangible and real money paying client was my old employer. So they got me back in to deliver a leadership training, and it was the perfect synergy because I knew the team already, but now they could see me with a completely different hat on. But because I understood their vices, understood their problems, I made a really winning presentation and then delivered that training. So they ended up being one of my first high-paying clients.
Did they approach you, or did you approach them?
So they had mentioned, someone had mentioned to me, oh my gosh, Michelle, we're going to be looking for a trainer in a particular area. So I said, okay, in that case, why don't I pitch? And you can go through the whole tender process. But because I knew that I've already got leverage there.
Obviously, it's going to be me.
So that's what we did. So Little Dicky Bird told me, and I thought, let me get in there.
And that must have been a beautiful kind of 360 experience. Like, wow, I left here as an employee and I'm coming back as with you as my client. That must have been a
consultant. It was really weird at first, and I had to almost put my big panties on and just say, Michelle, these are not your friends, your colleagues. So I had to go in with a different mindset. So I had to really set the tone at the beginning because they still saw me as Michelle. But then once I set the tone, then they realised, okay, she's not playing. Yeah.
But taking it back a bit, What was the journey? Obviously, you said it was quite a senior level position that you had in the organization. What was the journey to that? Because I think a lot of the time when people are entrepreneurs, we talk about just the entrepreneurial part. But actually, if you was in a senior position, that's still a powerful journey that you went on. So how did you get from wherever it was that you started to being in this really senior position?
So I first started, so when I started getting into, I started off doing office management at first at 2 companies before that. And then I was made redundant when I was pregnant with my daughter. When I was made redundant, there was no ring fencing. I didn't have any consultations, and I thought that's a bit strange. And I thought if I knew and understood my rights better, I could have argued and I could have made sure that I was treated fairly. And I ended up not re-engaging with the organisation. But I thought, okay, so I wanted to get down into the HR route. So my next role was like I think a HR officer role. And I worked myself up, and I thought, if I'm a generalist, I'll never be senior. So I wanted to start specialising. So, and I just had a knack for employment law, which has got to be the most boring, but the most well paid.
The most useful, especially from an entrepreneurial perspective.
Yeah, so everybody wanted to get into recruitment, which is actually the least paid. The highest is anything around remuneration. So, employment law was up there. So, but I had just had a knack for understanding complex legislation and able to convert that into something simpler. And I noticed that some of these companies, they were having issues understanding and interpreting the law. So I thought, if I can really get my head around this and really understand it, I can now apply for other jobs and say that I'm a specialist in this area. So that's what I did. So when I got this role, and I worked my way up, and then what I wanted it to have some presence with the board. So I actually made it my obligation to meet individually with at least 2 of the board members to build my own relationship with them, so that now they can see me in this light, and then when we're at work, I can present to them the facts around the people strategy and what we should be doing going forward. So that's how I worked myself up, where I had to build relationships with the senior leaders who were not they weren't used to seeing someone like me, a black woman in my position, and that particular company, they hadn't hired any ethnic minorities. There was only one other person before me, and they've been going for about 30, 40 years. Yeah. So they were keen to keep me for whatever reasons, but I was keen to stay and to prove to them that I can do a good job, irrespective of gender, irrespective of race. And I think I proved that.
And in typical She's the Boss interview style fashion, I have 2 questions and I need to remember which one. I need to remember them both. So the first question is, you clearly have been very strategic in what you've done in your career. Where did that strategic thinking come from? Is it something inherent, or is it something that's been developed, or where does it come from?
I think it's in 2 parts. My mum, she has been very instrumental in my life, and she's always told me to, go for it. Don't see yourself as second rate. You're just as good as them, and think of ways to get a seat at the table. Always that type of language. So I was used to it, and dealing with HR, and within the HR industry, we get such a stick for not being strategic. So I started to just surround myself with the real strategic players in my industry and just listen. And you know what? I'm a very good listener and a deep listener, because I listen to what's being said and I listen to what's not being said. And I will just go to the meetings, and I made it my duty to go to policy meetings, go to roundtable debates. And even if I had nothing to offer or to say at that time, I just listened. I listened to the way they spoke. I listened to the things they didn't say. I listened to their tonality. I listened to their pace. And all of that has fed into, when you're speaking to certain people at certain levels, you slow the way that you talk. because they have a different pace. Those kind of things in terms of non-verbal cues, all of those kind of things I picked up, and I think it's really helped me that I can build relationships with the receptionist or the cleaner. We all get on, and I know how to then present myself to the board. I know how to pitch to the board. I know what kind of things and the language that they speak and the cultural context around that.
That's such a great answer. I feel like I could just speak to you all day. So the next question, which I've remembered, which is very rare, as a woman and as a Black woman navigating maybe some of those more exclusive spaces and where you're looking around and not seeing people that look like you, how were you impacted by that, and what kind of tips would you give to somebody trying to navigate a similar space? Because I know for me, I have really struggled with dealing with stuff like microaggressions and even obviously now I do two things. So I do my She's the Boss business, but I'm also a contractor providing business advice. And just a quick story, a couple of months ago I was sent out to meet with a new client who seemed like a great guy, and actually midway through there was a lady that was in the office that I just was getting a funny vibe from, and the man just blurted out that he wants to work with me and I'm fabulous, and he doesn't care what she says because she doesn't really like Black people, and then started telling stories about when she met this Asian guy and what she was saying about him, and how when she started, she said, I work with anyone but not the coloured. And I remember I had that kind of fight or flight instinct, and I went back and I said, I'm not going back there. And and I'm going to try and speed this up. I can't be convoluted.
That's all right. No, it's just interesting.
But my mom and a few other people, I think even my husband, said, you should stick around and work with them to prove to them that you can, irrespective of whether you're Black or you're a woman or whatever, you are worthy. And I remember very clearly saying at the time, that's not my responsibility and I'm not partaking, and I didn't. And to be honest, that's something that I probably would, even till today, I would repeat. But then for somebody else that might have to, I didn't have to because I don't have to, but let's just say you did, what kind of tips would you give? How did you navigate? It might not have been as overt, but any situation where it's just you and nobody else like you, it's going to have an impact.
This is an interesting one. I've been asked this a number of times actually, and I have not, it hadn't been apparent to me that I have faced any form of racism, microaggression, or anything like that. Now, I say it hasn't been apparent to me. It's probably been there, and I have glimpsed it. But my mum's always said to me, you get things on merit. And she's never in my growing up has used the race card and say, oh, we didn't get it because we're Black, or we shouldn't go for it because we're Black. So that's never been a part of my growing up. It's never been a part of my psyche. I just about remember that I'm Black. I'm being quite serious with you. And I just don't ever think about it because I haven't been brought up to think about it or to engage with it. So when I think when I started noticing it is when they would say things like, but I noticed it was more with other people, but not with myself. We were at an event and there was a Nigerian lady and the guy came and he tried to pronounce her name and he was having issues pronouncing her surname. And then he said, you know what, I'll forget that. It's a silly name anyway. I was like, whoa. And I was like, and I really felt it for her. And I thought, I'm going to speak to the guy. So she said, no, don't. But I did. And I said, oh, you don't realise, but what you said was really dismissive and really rude. And she shouldn't be made to feel like that. So after we had that talk, I was thinking, gosh, Michelle, just because I'm living in my own world and bubble, I don't see it, it is there. Mm-hmm. It is so much there. So like if I pitch for work and I don't get it, I've never ever thought I didn't get it because of this or because of that. I just thought, oh my God, I'm just not the right person, or I've got too much of this or too little of that. But what, as I get older, I'm noticing it a bit more and I'm seeing it, like little slight remarks and things like that. And I purposely wanted to understand from their perspective, to see what they saw. And until now, my mentor is a white man. And I remember getting a little bit of stick from people saying, oh, you know, why have you got a white mentor, or why is he a man, and all of that. And I said, because I want to see things through his eyes and through his perspective, because he's going to teach me things that another black woman could never teach me, because they've never experienced it. But I've got my mum, so I can learn from her. I'm a black woman, so I can talk about it, but I cannot experience something unless I'm working alongside or in close proximity with someone who is white and who is male, because I need to see things from their perspective. And having him as my mentor has changed the game for me. In the terms of, he's even corrected the way I speak, not because, oh, it's too black or it's too cultural, but there's things that probably I say, and I say so often because I've just been brought up saying it. And he was saying, if you want to be speaking to these leaders, you can't say things like that. But if I had probably like a black female mentor, she probably wouldn't have noticed that, because we speak the same code, we've got the same language. So I'm learning little things from him that I probably wouldn't have been learning from someone else. And it's opened my eyes.
It's opening my eyes. That was not the answer I was expecting. That's so interesting. And it's particularly interesting because one of the reasons I started doing these interviews was because I was doing my dissertation for my MBA and exploring female entrepreneurship. And one of the key things that I uncovered was around the importance of role models. But it was role models that, I suppose, kind of what you said, that actually probably can't add anything new because it's a similar experience. They might just be further down the journey. So it's really interesting that you've taken that approach. And actually, now you're saying it, it seems really counterintuitive, but actually that makes sense. But I never would have considered that.
And I did at one year, I interviewed a lot of really senior women in leadership or in very high profile roles. And it was very interesting that they said all of them bar one, all of their mentors were men. And I thought that's really interesting. And I don't know whether the men took it upon themselves to mentor these women because they thought, oh, probably they're not going to be a threat or whatever. But the women were really learning at their feet, and from their experience and learnings from these mentors, they're all in really high senior positions. So it was quite an interesting little investigation, really.
It is interesting. And even you saying about how you was brought up. So I had not necessarily an opposite experience, but I was always very much aware of my blackness and the impact that could have. But funny enough, since I've started doing what I do, until that specific incident that I just said, I have been in a similar place. Actually, it's something that I don't necessarily pay as much attention to as I probably did previously. And that's why I was so affronted when that situation occurred, because it's like I'd forgotten, because I'm good at what I do. So if somebody sees me, or when I have these meetings with people, of course they want to work with me because I can provide the results and I can show that I can get the results. And that was, even with this guy, he wanted to work with me for that reason. Right. But I don't want to be in that environment, and actually it's not my job to be an advocate or the social proof. Like I'm not an experiment, and actually my time is precious and I would rather spend it with people that I'm not trying to prove a point to.
Yeah, I hear that totally.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the fact that at times you forget that you're black.
Yeah, I really have, and then I almost have to like remind myself. And plus, my husband's not black, so and my step brothers and sisters, none of them black. So so I've been brought up quite multicultural and multi-raced. So yeah, I only remember when I'm black when somebody else points it out.
No, that's interesting. It's interesting because, as I said, outside of in work, I would say that, and in business and in interacting with a lot of the clients, I would say I'm like that. But then outside of that, I'd say I'm quite the opposite. I'm very, very much aware. But I think that's socialization, right?
Yes. When you're with your friends and stuff like that, yeah. And it's not about me forgetting my roots. none of that at all. It's just that in a work atmosphere, it's never come up.
No, and I think that's a good thing, because I think sometimes we can wear our blackness like a burden. And as you said, sometimes, like I've come into contact with people that, particularly in business, and they're trying to get clients, and it is that, oh, they don't want to work with me because I'm black, and then they start to wear it as a thing, and it can impact their confidence. And actually, I think disregarding it, and not completely disregarding it, because there will, as like in my case, there will be times where you're confronted with it, but not letting it wear you down and not letting it be at the forefront of your thoughts.
Totally.
So you started the business, you were working for a bit, and then at what point, and obviously you said, not even at what point, you already answered this, you quit, and January was the start of the new year. Did you have a specific like 12-month plan? Did you have a 3-year goal, or did you kind of just wing it?
Winged it. I'm not even gonna lie. I'm not going even to lie on this podcast. I did wing it. I tell you when I started to really knuckle down is when I noticed I'm winging it, but I got into a situation where I didn't know when I was going to get paid next. And I thought, oh, this is outside my comfort zone. This is why I liked work, because I knew what was coming in every month. Now I don't know what was coming in, so it was unpredictable. And I thought the only reason why it's unpredictable because I have no business plan. I have no plan of action for the next month and the next goals, whatever. So I think, so let's say if I started in January, I would say probably by as far as November. You know, it took that time because I was getting work in, and I had no marketing strategy. I had no nothing. I was just out there doing the work, and I was just getting referred. But then I thought, people can't live on referrals. It's not predictive. I have no idea if that person doesn't refer me, what happens next. So let's say in month 11, I just thought, okay, Michelle, let's now put a strategy together, put a plan. And then that's when I started planning. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to branch out to do. This is what I need to be partnering with. Yeah. And I did all that good stuff.
My computer's making loads of noise. So my next question is more related to your business and what you're doing. I've had in my own personal businesses and also witnessing my family businesses and some of my clients' businesses, one of the key issues often is staff and HR. And I've personally had some terrible incidents with like tribunals and having to fire people and lots of nasty situations. And obviously one of the areas you specialize in is around, you said, supporting entrepreneurs and ensuring that they have a HR function, even for their first hire. What kind of tips and advice would you give for somebody that maybe doesn't necessarily have the finance to outsource HR or to have anybody assisting them in the recruitment process to make sure that they don't have some of the terrible experiences that can occur?
Yeah, I think what anyone would need to do in terms of looking at their first hire is it doesn't have to be done in a certain process the way HR does it. You can do it your own way, but I would always hire for skills that you don't have. And I think the problem with business owners, we want to get people who are like us already because it's our baby, and we don't want to share it. We don't want to tell people how it all works because only we know it because it's in our heads. But all the people that I know who've had their first hire, I said the very first thing you need to do, even if you don't use me or even, there's other resources out there, just get whatever's in here onto paper. And then let's make it make sense, because there's so many things we do naturally that a new person coming in, and then we wonder why they can't do it well and do it the way that we want, because they don't know. It's not their business. And what we do naturally and subconsciously, we're expecting them to know this, or we expect them to realize, and that's not the thing. So you almost have to take a step out of your business as the owner and think, okay, from the outside looking in, what's the natural process? And so I always use like flow diagrams, like, what is business as usual on a Monday? What do you usually do? Write it down. So I've had to do that, write it all down, so that when I made my first hire, I had like a list of things that I do in what order, what software I use, and what phone calls and and even getting the numbers. Where are the numbers saved? think the simple things like that. You think, yeah, the numbers are on your phone, but they haven't got your phone. So it's so different when you make your first hire. You're struggling because you're letting someone in and you don't know if they're going to do a good job, and you want them to do a good job like you because you think no one can do the job like you. But I always say hire for skills, and the skills that you don't have, or the skills that you're not so good at, because they will complement you, and that's what it's about, complementing. So I think the very first thing they should be doing is just get everything out of here onto paper, and then look for people who have the right skills but also the right values. So I think the value thing, especially in small business, it matters so much, because we are our own boss, we are everything, and we have our own strong values. You want to find someone who's in alignment with that, but yet they have different skill set that you can definitely leverage on.
I love what you just said about the processes and everything in the brain, because that's one of my areas of expertise. It's around systems and processes, and I have lost count of the amount of clients that I've worked with, and I'm saying, where is the paperwork to explain how to do this? And like, oh, it's in my head. What happens if you go outside and get hit by a boss? And it sounds very dramatic, and sometimes I use less dramatic examples, but sometimes you have to give the drama to get people to wake up. And sometimes also people say, well, I'm not hiring anyone right now, it's not going to be for another year, so I'll do it then. No, do it now, because when you then are in the situation that you need to hire someone, you don't have the time to be sitting down transferring what's in your head into paper. And flowcharts, I use flowcharts when I do my systems and processes sessions, but smart art on Word or on PowerPoint, simple way of just mapping stuff out. And
it really is. And this is why I think a lot of entrepreneurs suffer with overwhelm, because they know they need somebody, but they haven't taken the time out to put down the processes and the systems. So they just think, oh my God, I know how to do it, let me just do it myself. Oh, I know how to do it, I'll just do it. Then you get overwhelmed, then you get burnt out, then you get depressed. It's a cycle, isn't it? And you just think, take out a day of your life and just let's systemize it, put down the process, so that somebody else can pick up the handbook and run with it.
Yeah, it frees up so much time, and this is why so many owner founders end up doing everything, or they take on staff and still end up doing everything, because it takes too long to sit with the new hire to explain. So you end up paying someone who's sitting there twiddling their thumbs while you're still running around doing 15 million things. So if there's one thing, there's many things you can take away from this interview, but for those watching or listening, please write down your systems and processes.
Get it out of your head. Get it out of your head. And you actually have to sit with someone to do that. I've realised as well. A lot of people think they can do it themselves, but they miss bits. Because
it's obvious. It's like that thing that if you read something, you add the words in because you expect to see it there. And I think it's a similar thing with process, because I've done that with so many clients, and I'm like, well, how did we get from here to here? And they're like, oh, well, you do so and so. It doesn't say that.
Exactly.
How are they supposed to know? Yeah, no, it's one of my particular loves. So I could sit here and talk about systems and processes for a long time. What has been the greatest lesson that you've learned along the journey? And if you could go back, 4 or 5 years and tell yourself something, what would you tell yourself?
Okay, so this is going to sound like a very weird lesson, but it got me so bad, so I keep repeating it. I think one of my greatest lessons is when you are proposing or making a pitch, don't give all the goodies away. For me, that was a learning. And I just assumed, or wrongly or rightly assumed, that when I am pitching for a particular contract, it was for a training contract, put a lot in there so there's no shadow of a doubt they're going to want to take you. And that's what I did. And we went back and forth, and she goes, oh, I love this idea. So how would you do that in practice? Then I typed out my answer. This is how I would do it, and this is what I would use, and these are the resources. And they led me on a merry trail, because they were asking me all the questions, and I was right. And I didn't seek help from somebody else, because I thought, no, I got this. And once again, it's that attitude of thinking you know everything. And so say that was on the Friday. She emailed her all the final stuff, and she said, "Oh, brilliant! This is really great." And I was meant to start on Monday, and then I was meant to start on Tuesday. Then on the Monday, got an email say, "Oh, Michelle, it's with regret that we're not going to go forward with you." And I was like, "Okay," and I heard on the grapevine that they went ahead with the training, but they had everything they wanted because I had supplied them with everything.
Yeah.
That has been the biggest. I was so upset. I was like, I'm not even gonna lie. I cried so much. I was so gutted, gutted. So that was a big learning curve. That, you know, at the pitching and proposal stage, you give enough for them to want to choose you, but you don't give all the goodies away. You've got to retain some of that.
Yeah, that's such a valuable lesson. I've also experienced something very similar. Put together a package, an event for this when I was doing an event management company. Put this big package together. I was pretty much told it's a done deal. We just need to get the sign off. It was a very big organization in Birmingham. And then same thing, I was supposed to go and sign the paperwork, and they came back and said, actually, we've decided we're not even doing the event at all. About 6 months later, I get an anonymous email with a copy of the tender for an event management company to tender to do this event. And when I looked at the document for the tender, it was my proposal. They just put some fancy pictures on. And literally, word for word, it wasn't even like similar. It was my actual, which turned into huge arguments. In the end, they had to pay me for my intellectual property because I had evidence. But again, it was very upsetting. And when I saw the event happen, and I wasn't the person delivering it, because I didn't obviously tender for it because I was battling to get paid. Yeah, I cried as well. And I think sometimes...
Yeah, it's horrible, isn't it?
Yeah. People are very vicious, and there's no friends in business. And actually, sometimes I think we can be too trusting, especially in the early stages. You can be too trusting, and because your word means something, you expect that other people's word means something. And you have to take everything with a pinch.
Yeah, I've learned that. That's another learning. You know, you may have integrity, and there's things that you will never do. And I have learned not everybody who says they have integrity has integrity. And that's been a wake up call for me as well. And I just thought, okay, don't worry. Each month I'm learning. There's new things I'm learning. And in answer to your other question, what would I tell my younger self? You know what I would say? Ask for more. That's what I would do. And I think as a young woman growing up, and even in my early adult life, I settled too much. And I see it now with other people, other women still settling. They're trying to give the facade that, yeah, I've got everything, but you're settling, and I know you're settling. And so it's always asking for more. When something's offered to you, ask for more. I sit in interviews with my clients. The women come in to be interviewed. Let's say the salary is 60K. They tell you A, B, and C, and they're happy to accept 60K. The men come in, they know it's advertised as 60K. They can't do half the stuff on the job description, but they're asking me for 75K. And the joke is, when we put out, and as human resource professionals or as CEOs, when we put out an ad, if the ad says 60K, we have a buffer. So we allow leg room. If we find somebody who's brilliant and they want more, we're able to push it. But the women never ask for more. And I see that in business. You know, we're so grateful to get a contract. Oh my God, that contract's come in, great. We just run with it. But we haven't negotiated. We should have negotiated even more. We could either negotiate to deliver more, or negotiate on more money, or negotiate on more rights. But we don't. We're just actually happy to have been asked. We're grateful. So one of the things I would tell myself, my younger self, and tell myself now at the age of 42, ask for more, Michelle.
Yeah, I am looking great for 42, by the way, just as an aside. But part of my dissertation, again, was around that same kind of thing. And why is it that women settle for less? And kind of going on what you're saying, one of the first ladies I interviewed actually for She's the Boss was Diane Grayson, who looks a lot at the diversity pay gap. And also one of the other ladies, Natasha Stromberg, was looking at the gender pay gap. And actually, one of my thinkings has been based on my research. Is it that employers are paying less, or is it that women are accepting less?
Right.
And which one is it? Is it a combination of the two, or is it because a lot of the people I've spoken to, women, have said, yeah, I was offered this, particularly in business as well, like a contract, same kind of thing. I was offered this and I just said yes. Whereas the men I speak to, I was offered this and I said no. And actually, if that's how much it is, I'm not doing it. And I've tried to model what I do around that actually I don't ever just accept and all. If you think it's worth 300, then ask for 500 and let's just see how it works out.
And it always goes down to like childhood and how we were raised and all of that. But women have a tendency, when they see something, they see it as fixed. Men have a tendency to see things as variables. So they feel that the goalposts can be changed. Everything is negotiable. So now I'm getting into, and for the last 2 years, I've been getting into this thing around asking for more, how women should negotiate better. There's other ways that you can negotiate on values, on different things. It doesn't always have to be on money, on remuneration. But it's learning to know that nothing is fixed. Even in law, nothing is fixed. So we think it's fixed, but it's never fixed. There's always a case law. There's always something that can be changed. So when someone says to me, Michelle, the figure is this, and I'll say the figure isn't that. Because if I do a bit more here, take a bit less here, we can do it for this. Just negotiated. And it has to be a win-win situation, but I have to make sure that I'm winning as much as you're winning.
I think though sometimes it's rooted in fear as well. But some of the conversations I've had is, well, if I ask for more, then they're going to say, no, I don't want anything. And I'm like, actually, I don't think if they wanted you in the first place for whatever it is, whether that be for a job or for a contract or a piece of work, if you ask more, the worst they're going to do is say, actually, we're not giving you more. This is it. So even if it is, let's just say, it's not movable, you shouldn't have the fear that somebody's going to say, actually, no, I don't want you now because you asked for more. No, they'll just say no.
Yeah, they'll just say no. And I think as well, we feel, or if they say no, then I've lost the contract, and then you're scared because you don't know when the next one, because this has happened to me. I've had to public service, and I asked for something and I actually settled, and I know that I should have asked for more, but I was worried. I thought, oh my gosh, if I say something more than this, they're going to say, do you know what, Michelle, listen, thank you for pitching for us, but no. And they'll go to someone else. And then I'll be left again like, oh my God, when am I next going to get a next big contract? So you're right. It is that fear thing, that scarcity mindset again. And just not knowing, or we know our worth, but not walking in our worth.
Yes, and that is it. And for me, particularly this year, it has been me telling myself and being bold in the fact that this is how much my time is worth. If somebody can't afford to pay that, then that is not somebody I'm trying to work with. And that's something that I've been very strict with, because there's been times where I'm doing all these speaking engagements and I'm traveling and I'm tired and I've got a child and I've got a husband and I want to get home, but I'm here doing goodness knows what for goodness knows who, for nothing that is anywhere near worth what my time is worth.
Getting out of bed for. Yeah.
And I love Naomi. Was it Naomi that said, I don't get out of the bed for less than 10 grand?
Yeah.
And I love that. And obviously I will get out for way less than 10 grand. But I know what my get out of bed fee is.
Right.
Especially when and the time when I know this works properly is when it's winter time, because I don't like coming outside in the winter. So the time that I really get strict with it is, am I really going to drive in the cold, in the rain, in the snow, in the fog that I'm scared of for this small amount that's not adding value? No, I'm not. So if I'm not going to do it in the winter, then I shouldn't do it in the summer just because the sun is shining.
And the thing is, you mentioned something that really, and something reminded me of something. So about 2 years ago, a lawyer got in contact with me and said, Michelle, can you take notes at a disciplinary hearing? So I said, okay, fine. I usually either co-chairing, but I'm not, full of it that I can't take notes. So I said, yeah, I'll take notes. So then, and I know how much note takers charge, and it's not a lot. So he said to me, okay, so how about 150, 200 pounds an hour to take notes? So I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll take that, because I know it's nowhere near that. But then he set that new price for me, and I thought, if I can get paid £200 an hour to take notes, just taking notes, we know that my coaching services, my HR is going to be way more than that.
Yeah, it has to.
And he set the bar for me. I didn't even set it myself. I didn't even know my hourly rate was even nowhere near that. But he set the bar for me. So no, that's it. You can't go lower than that after that, can you? And you do more transformative work.
Yeah.
I was taking notes, and I was taking notes on the phone as well. I wasn't even there. I didn't even have to travel.
Wait, now I want to be a note taker. I can type quickly. Give me the hook up. That sounds good. No, it's funny because actually one of the reasons that got me into this mindset this year is because I've received a rate card from somebody that does work that is different to what I do, but I feel that I add more value because I have greater experience and credentials. I'm like, they're charging double what I charge. No, this can't work. Yeah, it was the same thing that set the bar for me, and it shook me up. Like, what are you playing at? Because actually, one of the things that we also don't always realize is by being cheap. So not good value for money, but by being cheap, you cheapen your service. Yes, you cheapen yourself, and that's not something that I and nobody else should be prepared to do. So sometimes you really have to be bold in your worth and say no to things that devalue your worth.
Yeah. Totally.
So before I turn this into a 2-hour interview, let's round it down. And you've given advice throughout, but this is the pivotal bits of advice. So 3 pieces of advice that you would give to a woman who is in the very early stages of her entrepreneurial journey.
Okay, so one of the key things definitely is to get a network around you that you can trust. Mm-hmm. Very, very important, because it's got to be, I call it a network of trusted advisors. Mm-hmm. And they must consist of one who does law, because they will tell you about your intellectual property. And not to give away, when people say, speak at an event, oh, can I have your slides? No, you cannot have my slides. Intellectual property. So you need someone who can advise you on things like that. You definitely need an accountant. We can't be doing our own bookkeeping because they know how to use all the tax stuff and all of that good stuff. And then outside of that, you just want someone who can feed into your life, mentors or support networks, people like that, and not people who are going to agree with what you're going to say. So when I talk about trusted advisors, people can advise you, not necessarily agree with you. So that's the one thing, is your network advisors. The second thing I would definitely say is you have to remain credible and visible, because out of sight is out of mind. Mm-hmm. When I see you, I remember you. When somebody then says to me, oh my God, Michelle, I need a coach that specializes in this. Because you were just there at the forefront of my mind, I'm going to recommend you. If I don't see you, if I don't hear you, I'm not going to remember you. However much I love the work that you do, I'm just not going to remember. So you have to show up credibly. That means with great content and valuable content, but you have to show up and be credible and be visible. That's the second one. And the third one is one that I mentioned before, which I still live by, is you have to ask for more. Mm-hmm. And asking for more doesn't mean asking for more money necessarily. It's just demand more. Mm-hmm. Get more respect for yourself. People, women, when they come into the market, they feel, I'm new to the market. I don't have all this credibility. I need to start low. You don't have to. And don't listen to those people who say that you have to. You know you, but you must understand it's not about how much they offer you, is how much you are willing to accept. Mm-hmm. That's the difference. People twist that and they think, oh my God, they offered me £150 for speaking, how dare they? No. They must think you're worth £150. So what messages and what signs and signals are you sending out why they think you're that? Mm-hmm. The difference is, how much are you willing to accept? So when they tell you 150, then don't do it for 150. Mm-hmm. I don't care whether you've got no more money coming in this week. Don't do it for 150. Once you do it for 150, you're known for 150. Mm-hmm. So it's not about what they're happy to offer you is what you're willing to accept. So when you say no, actually my fees start from £500 for speaking, then they know they have to either pay or they find someone else and be willing to walk away. You have to walk away, but you keep saying yes, you keep playing low, you're always going to be getting short change all the time. We have to stop trying to make pounds out of pennies. Just get the pounds.
Yeah, I hear to that.
I'm telling myself as well. I'm telling myself, I have to tell myself daily. Because no one has reached, we haven't arrived yet. So I have to tell myself daily, Michelle, no. So I have numbers in my kitchen where I do most of my work, and I have to have the numbers there because I have to remember it's lower than that. No. If they're going to go lower, they need to give me something else in return so that at least I still get the value.
Yeah, that's true. Definitely. It has been an absolute joy speaking with you this evening, and I've gone over my self-imposed time limit, but it was worth it, so I don't care. What platforms can people find out more about you and the People's Partner?
Brilliant. So if they are on social media, you can find me under Michelle Raymond or the People's Partner, under both. So that'd be on LinkedIn, definitely, Facebook and Instagram, also on Twitter. Got all of them, but LinkedIn and Facebook are my main bags. So the current website is www.michelleraymond.co.uk.
That's fab. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciated talking to you this evening. There's been so much value that I've taken away. So I'm hoping those of you watching, remember to like and share on your social networks. And if there's anything that Michelle has said that has resonated with you, that has really added value, which I'm sure that it has, please write a comment in the comment section. And as usual, if you haven't, I'm sure that this interview should remind you that you need to subscribe so that you're the first to watch when I put out a new video. And if you're interested in getting involved and being interviewed for Female Entrepreneur Stories, please email me at daniela@she'sthebossinternational.com. And make sure you tune in next Sunday at 8 p.m. for another interview. Thanks for watching. And thank you again, Michelle.
Thank you.